we've been working. We're very early in the process trying to get YMCA kind of between Sheridan and Willamina.
Cale George, mayor of Sheridan. It's exciting to get an opportunity to see what's really going on in the heartbeat of the city. Part of the reason I wanted to get involved in talking to you today is because it seems like, maybe it's just my imagination, but Sheridan has been more in the news register with headlines than in the last year than I'm used to seeing, and that being things that are actually happening in the government, not like an arrest or something happening on the periphery, but what's going on right there with the city. And so a couple of I'll talk about three of the things that jump out at me that I remember seeing. There was quite a bit of talk about what to do with the houseless, just like every other city has. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder how extensive the issue is in Sheridan. And then there was an article about fluoridation of the water or not, and also whether or not to allow the press into your executive sessions for city council meetings. So would you be willing to sort of get us caught up on how things are going with the houseless situation and the fluoridation situation and the press and how that all came about?
Yeah, so first one, so for the houseless, really, I guess the main thing is trying to think of how far to go back. Essentially, we have, I believe it's 1 room and 2 beds reserved at the new, I guess it's not new, but at the facility in McMinnville, where the Motel 6 would be.
Oh, okay.
So we have 2 spots there for anyone who wants, shelter. But I know we do have people who aren't, who are living, outside. I don't see many on the street. I think we had some maybe a year or two ago, but from what I understand is that there's some of like the fields nearby that's private property. We have
not down by the river necessarily. I remember hearing some people talk about folks down by the river, but I don't know if that's still the case.
During the summer for sure by the river. But there's a couple spots along the river, but I think far enough away where they're not like at risk of the water getting to them. From what I understand and from what I've heard, it's private property, and the owner is okay with people staying there.
Got it.
So there's not much the city can do. I've been told there's, if there's like a danger, like they're setting fires or something. I believe we can let Yamhill County know, but as far as the city, there's not a whole lot we can do.
So a little follow up on that. Do you have staff that are dedicated to helping decide who might be candidates for the facility? You have 2 beds in McMinnville?
No. So part of the, I don't want to call it a problem necessarily, but part of an issue that I see is what happens is when you have a facility like that in McMinnville, from what I understand, somebody can't just go. They can't just show up.
Right.
They have to be referred.
Mm-hmm.
And normally it's a referral by another like agency or organization.
Got it.
So we have Provoking Hope is back in Sheridan, and they can refer people.
Okay.
There, and I'm blanking on the name of it, and I feel bad because I spent time trying to, get that.
Is it Project Turnkey? Are you trying to come up with the name? Is it Turnkey or?
So, but I know they also have like more than one facility, because I know there's the Motel 6, and I feel like they have something on Adams too.
Yeah, there's something new that has just been open for maybe less than a month near the Walgreens. But I don't know what it's called either. It's hard to keep it all straight. There's been a lot of new developments in this area for sure.
Yeah, this whole thing kind of started with this the state passing that law that basically I forget what the exact language is, but it was basically saying if your city doesn't have a place for people to stay, you can't remove them from public property, I believe. And so, like you were saying, a lot of other cities were having kind of to deal with that same issue. Um, and we, uh, it's been a little while, but from what I remember, it was kind of like the thought was, oh, are we going to have a bunch of people, sleeping in, public places, and if we don't have anywhere to send them, we can't do anything. And I think that's
Right.
kind of how it got started. Is that our thought was that we needed somewhere for people to go, otherwise, all of our public spaces could be, filled.
Good
Um,
answer. I appreciate that. That's
and
helpful.
and we, because we didn't want people on the sidewalks, streets, and parks, and but then as time went on, we for one realized that the people didn't want any sort of shelter, and two, we didn't have the resources to even have one.
Right.
Um, there's no way. We got money from Lucetta Elmer's office. Actually, I believe it was from the state, but she's our rep. Um, and I remember I was pretty early being a counselor. It was maybe March or April, or it could have been even later than that. We made, as a council, we made a list of priorities of what we would like to see funding for, and I don't know. Well, the homeless a shelter was on there. I don't think it was our top choice, and we submitted that list, and then we got funding for a shelter, and there was immediate uh, opposition. I don't know what you want. There was people immediately got upset, and looking back, I totally understand, and I don't think we put out enough notice or feedback to the community, because it was kind of like, as a counselor, like, yeah, this seems like a good thing to do. And then once we got that money, it was immediately, what are you guys doing? And
Uh
I think
huh.
if we could go back, I think if we had more public input, we could have probably understood more about what the people wanted to see the city do. And once we realized, okay, we don't have the resources, space, or an interest of citizens to have this in town, um, then we kind of pivoted. There was a housing task force established to try and figure out what to do. Um, I was a counselor then when it started, and then I believe basically what happens is there were several meetings, and there's a whole other story with that, with the task force. But essentially, what happened is uh, Provoking Hope said that they would be interested in coming back into town, and that kind of essentially ended the task force session, because we basically wanted a resource center, and we were even thinking of trying to fund it ourselves, or just having a place for people to go if they needed help, needed resources, things like that. And so that's what Provoking Hope basically provided. And we got a final report from that task force, and the suggestion was to continue and have more conversations. But I haven't scheduled any since I became mayor. I've kind of been more focused on economic development, and trying to get our downtown back up and going. Um, but that doesn't mean that you know the houseless situation went away. I just kind of pivoted what I was trying to focus on, and with Provoking Hope, they definitely can help. And as I said before, they're an organization that can refer people to services. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, people can't just say, I need services. At least from what I understand, I could be wrong on that, but from what I've been told, it sounds like you need a third party to refer someone to these services. And I know they have helped several families, but we don't have anyone on staff, dedicated to referring people. Our code enforcement officer has helped a lot of people, basically telling them where they need to go, and giving them resources. I know we have stuff at City Hall for people if they need some things. But in a small town with smaller town government, that's not her only job. That's a very small piece of what she does. Same with everybody at City Hall. They do a lot of different things. They don't just do one thing.
For sure.
Um, so
So the city hall is a warming center. The city hall's not very big, so I'm trying to figure out how that would actually work.
yeah, I'm not 100% where they go.
Okay.
It's kind of like what the library was. We
Okay.
allow people to come in and basically they can stay there, have a safe place, a warm place to be for a while, and then
Mm-hmm.
when City Hall closes, they unfortunately have to go. And uh, we had a cooling center over the summer. I think it opened, and what's nice with that is that by the time the business was closing, well, it wasn't a business; it was at our American Legion in town, and around 6 when it was closing, then outside it was starting to cool down, so
Mm-hmm.
it was better. But in the winter, it's the opposite. By the time it's closing down, City Hall's closing down, it's actually getting colder.
Yep.
And we tried, I know it, and trying to think, early on when I got on council, I even went to a couple meetings with the mayor at that time, trying to figure out who could provide space for people overnight, for a warming shelter or center or a warming place. We talked to a lot of churches, and from what I understood, it's for their insurance. It can be difficult because there's liability there,
Sure.
and they could get shut down, unfortunately,
Yep.
if or with their insurance. So that was hard, and even with the cooling center, it was hard to get people to volunteer. It's in the middle of the day, a lot of people are working, and with the warming center, that's if eventually we get to that point where we're trying to look for volunteers, I think that would be difficult too, because people would have to stay there overnight, and that's difficult with a lot of people. If they have families, like I wouldn't be able to do that. I have 2 kids. I can't, you know, I can't stay away,
Right.
over somewhere. I need to be home. A lot of people have to be home, and you know, that's what makes it difficult. But we do have, something during the day, but we really don't have the resources yet, anyways, to have a warming center.
Okay.
Right
Right.
now, that's at City Hall,
Okay.
and I
And the
believe.
fluoride.
Oh, the fluoride. So that was brought up. Well, even before I was mayor, one of our
Okay.
councilors had brought it up, and then when I became mayor, it was brought up again, and we kind of explored it. A couple of counselors worked on it, got some data. They talked to Wilmina, got some of their info. But I think what really, kind of really convinced everybody. Uh, well, I don't want to say that because I can't speak for everybody, but I think what there was a study from the U.S. government, one of the government agencies, that said that there was like a link between uh, fluoride levels and like children's IQs. Something
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the exact wording, but basically it found that there was a link between levels of fluoride and lower IQs. And I think once that came out, which that came out really close, it came out maybe a few months before there was a vote on whether or not to remove it. Um, Once that came out, it was like, oh, okay. maybe we should remove it. And I I think with today's, I don't want to say today's technology because it's like fluoride tablets. There's other ways to get fluoride and things, and and one of our counselors even brought up, a lot of the water actually isn't, we're not ingesting it. You know what I mean? It's watering lawns or washing clothes or getting on your body. Um, but yeah, that I only heard from one citizen uh, that was against it. I thought that there was going to be a lot more people, um, saying, "What are you doing?" Or, don't remove it. I heard from one person, and her concerns. She had valid concerns, um, but that was surprising to me. I thought I was going to hear from more people. Maybe other counselors got emails. I'm not sure, but I got one um, about it, and I mean that vote was is a unanimous vote to remove it. And one of the things too. I mean, you don't think about it too much if you're a citizen, but I mean there is a cost to adding it. It can kind of be, I mean, dangerous to employees the way they add it. It can, it's it can, the dust can, they have to have like full PPE when they add it to the
Hmm.
stuff. It can be kind of dangerous, but yeah, I think once that study came, it was kind of like, okay, maybe we should remove it. And we're not the only ones. Yamhill County, I think there's only a few left that do fluorinate the water still. Um,
Cool.
so
Well, it's
that
somebody within your board or your council, and you obviously had done some research and heard something and acted on it. To be honest with you, I think it's gonna probably come up a lot more until we have our new potentially approved head of the FDA and Health and Human Services. That would be RFK Jr., and he's been outspoken about things like that for quite a while. So if people read any of those things or made connections or even talked to the other cities who did it, then you can see why that would have come about. So how about and I don't think this is very controversial, but good job that you were willing to let a member of the press join your executive sessions with a caveat that they wouldn't report out on what they saw or heard, and it's just a local citizen, right?
Yeah. So, well, really, any. Um, so prior to that, I guess it was a resolution. I believe maybe it was an ordinance. But prior to that, the whole thing was that technically anybody could just come in, um, whether they were media or not, to executive sessions. Our public meeting, anybody can come in, of course, but executive sessions are closed to the public, except for members of the media. And prior to this policy, anybody could come in and say that they were media. Um, and I was kind of worried about that, like people joining on Zoom and we're not able to see them. And, I don't know how they would provide credentials, you know,
Right. Yep.
but so that was the idea behind the policy. And our city attorney was kind of like, we don't have any sort of policy that says what media is or who media is. So that was my thought to just to get that in there to kind of nail that down. Obviously, if you're a member of the press, now what happens is if you are press and you're not like on the like our approved list or whatever, you just fill out a form basically, and you can attend. We're not trying to keep people from attending. It was just we wanted to kind of tighten up our own policy that was saying like, well, who is media? Can someone just show up and say I'm a member of the media, and then they're in our executive session?
Right.
And especially during that time, we were having some executive sessions that were um, that there was a lot of or confidential information, and it was just it happened to work out that way. But we really haven't had a problem. And I think maybe some of our counselors were trying to prevent a certain person from attending, but he's he is uh, pretty much. I don't know if he has media credentials, but he is valuable to the community and is reporting on things. Um, I don't think he meets like the official qualification of a journalist, but he is a local member, and I wanted him to keep
Yeah.
coming to executive sessions. He'd really only been coming to a few. He maybe 5 before the policy was passed. But the whole caveat, and I think this goes for the whole state. Any media members that attend, they're directed to not report on what happened. They can
Exactly.
say it's pretty like I guess standard throughout the state, but it was just like that language, like members of the media or members of the press, and we didn't have anything that outlined who that was. There's some cities that have very long policies talking about this.
Hmm.
Ours is fairly short, but it was probably not something we had to do immediately. We weren't being flood. Our executive sessions weren't being flooded with people claiming they were media. Um, but sometimes it just kind of seemed like something that we could maybe get ahead of if we had a problem in the future, and it was just a policy that we didn't have that a lot of other cities do have. It kind of made sense to have it in place, but we definitely weren't trying to keep, at least I wasn't trying to keep anybody out of any meetings, executive sessions, or anything. Just kind of on the advice of counsel, like, okay, we needed to kind of tighten this up. And and it's not just like that type of policy. There's tons of our ordinances, codes, even our charter that is, it's outdated. And
Hmm.
it's, with the times when, you know in the 90s, that wasn't any sort of worry, people coming in, members of the media, because it was, that was prior to bloggers and things like that. And then once bloggers came in, it sounds like that really changed, what was considered media, especially with the internet.
Oh yeah, we have so many citizen journalists now, and I think that's why the so-called mainstream media or legacy media ratings have gone down, because people are looking for alternative sources of news. And so I think it's, to me, as a city council of Sheridan, if you have someone who is interested in, even number one, attending, number two, even I see that that person has a YouTube coverage of your meetings, that's just good for the whole town. So it seems like a positive. So turning the corner, you are you still currently without a city manager? And if so, what's it like operating without one?
Yeah, so we're still without a city manager. We have a uh, acting city manager, interim city manager.
Okay.
He's our public works director, um, and then we have a acting assistant city manager as well. She's the city recorder. So they're both kind of filling in, doing even more,
Yeah.
even more
Yeah.
do than they already do, um, trying to help us out. But it's hard. I'm not in City Hall every day, and I don't know what the day to day is like. But from what I've heard, I mean, it's hard because you're operating with one less person, and that person happens to be essentially the CEO of the organization. You know what I mean? And that's
Exactly.
hard.
Yep.
And that is hard. We're working with I call them the COG, the Council of Governments, the Mid Willamette Valley. They're going to be providing us with some names of people who could serve as an interim city manager, and I think we're going to be next meeting. We're going to be I think voting, or at least reviewing those suggestions. So within maybe by the end of the month, maybe even sooner, we may have a interim city manager, which will help. It'll help a lot. And then we're going to be deciding how we want to move forward as far as the recruitment. There's a couple different ways we can go about that to get a permanent city manager. The council of governments, like I mentioned, they do recruitment services. There's also an organization called Jensen Strategies. They've gotten city managers for cities all over. Dayton, they just got their city manager through them. We got our prior city manager through them. So we just need to decide on which way we want to go as far as how we want to recruit. I'm hoping
Mm-hmm.
by the end of June, but that's probably pushing it. I'm just thinking when our new, the 25-26 budget cycle starts is technically July 1. It'd be great if we could have a city manager, to start our new budget year, but I don't know if that's going to happen or not.
That's rough.
But
That's rough.
having will help, though.
Well, so prayers for those who had to add that to their things on their hat, as it were. I'm sure that they already had their plans full, and now they're even fuller. You had to pivot recently with how you decided what to do with the rest of your ARPA funds, and so what was decided after it was taken from the Sheridan Road renovation plan?
So originally it was kind of earmarked for Sheridan Road,
Which would have been great.
Yeah. The prior to me being on council, it was kind of earmarked for that. It was about 1.3 million, and then when I was on council, we picked from a list of like options for Sheridan Road, and at that time, the estimate I think was going to be like 9.6 million.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got closer, or when we started going out for bid, it came back at about 17 million.
Wow.
So that 1.3 million from ARPA wasn't going to be able to do anything because we didn't have the remaining, 6 million or 16 million. Sorry. So we kind of realized, okay, well, we aren't going to actually be able to use this for Sheridan Road because we don't have the money to do the whole project. It's possible we could have done a section or so, but I thought it was kind of wasteful to like do a small section or maybe repave a small section, and then we have to tear it up again to put in water and new sewer or something like that.
Yeah.
Or put in new water and sewer lines in a small section, and then we have to tear it up again to redo the whole road. But
Yep.
what we did decide to do with the ARPA money is several projects. One is getting we have a reservoir. I believe it's Bolson Road. It's across the street, across the road from FCI, and it hasn't been operating the way it should. We're going to be getting that fixed, and then I believe it's a new. I think it's called SCADA, I believe. And then we're going to be adding a parking lot down by what we call the Morgan Street Park, under the bridge. There's a side road, like if you're going down, I think it's Monroe, and you go right, there's a park there, and then it kind of goes under the bridge and comes back up. And steps kind of by IGA.
Yep.
On that side with the steps is called Chester Moore Park.
I didn't know that.
But on the other side of the bridge is called Morgan Street Park. To me, they're kind of one park because they flow together, but they're called different things. But so there's going to be a parking lot for Morgan Street Park, and then we're going to do some. They're not renovations. We're going to finish up. It's called the Hebert Memorial Plaza. There's like the big deck there next to Riverside Cafe. There's like a deck there. There's like a back wall sort of on that plaza, and that will be removed, and then there will be a sidewalk added. So you can from that deck area down to where the parking lot is, or down to where the park is.
Cool.
And they'll be like replacing some of the decking and things like that. I think we're adding a fence. And then we're going to be getting some speed signs in town. So it'll, I'm not 100% sure what the exact ones that we got, but I believe it'll show your speed and like, flash and say slow down.
My
So
favorite.
we're going to have a couple of those around town. I think we ordered 3, which I think will be, helpful. It'll just be, it'll be hard deciding where they need to go. Cause there's, a lot of places in town, but from what I understand, they can be relocated, which is nice. So like if we have them somewhere and it's like, this speeding isn't as, bad of an issue here anymore, or not at all, we can move it, relocate it to another spot. So
Yeah.
that's nice. And I believe we're trying to remember what all was on the project. I believe it's, I think water and sewer, SCADA, I think. I can pull up the full list, but the big thing is getting our Ballston Reservoir functioning as intended, and then the park, the plaza, and then the parking lot area there.
I think
That's
those are great ideas.
those are the big things.
I like it. So, but I have a question though. I mean, Sheridan Road and maybe the all the plumbing that maybe is old or aging underneath there. How do you get, or will you have to wait till it fails, or can ODOT jump in, or do you have to do a bond measure? How can you make enough money to 16 million or whatever you need to get that job done before it
Yeah,
gets even more expensive?
I don't think ODOT can help us because it's not an
Okay.
ODOT
Yeah.
road.
Right.
Um, my thought is having Business Oregon, working with them, and possibly getting a loan with them.
Mm.
They have like low interest loans. Depending on the program we qualify for, we could have like a 1% interest rate or possibly lower. Um, my my thinking is that if we just do the whole project at once, it could possibly, save us money, so we aren't doing sections.
Yep.
Because basically every time you have the crew come out, I think there's a mobilization fee. So every time they come out, it costs you money. So if we did it in phases, like broke it into, 6 sections maybe, every time they come out and start a new phase of that project, it would be like a new mobilization fee, which depending on how much the fee is, maybe it's worth it. Um, but my thinking was possibly getting, you know, a Business Oregon loan, and maybe some grants or something for water, for sewer. The big costs also happen to be the ones that are hard to get grants for. Um, it's, from my understanding, it's hard to get grants to pay for street paving, and then it's also hard to get grant funds to pay for electrical undergrounding. And so those are 2 big pieces of the project. We could get grants for water lines, and even sewer, um, and I think, and this is, I actually want to have someone from Business Oregon come and talk to us, because I think if we got a loan, it might be possible if we got a grant later to kind of pay off some of that, but I'm not 100% sure. So I even have some questions about it, that process as well. Um, and so I want to look at that more, but my hope is that we could get, enough funding, and then we could just do the whole street at once, because it is bad. It needs to be replaced. And it's one of our main, you know, main entrances into town. And I know
For those who know.
yeah, we're really, there's, trying to count, there's maybe only 4. I'm trying to think. Sheridan Road, exit 34 and 33,
Mm-hmm.
Red Prairie, maybe
Right.
Harmony, if you, well,
Yeah.
that's not Harmony, but anyways, we don't have a whole lot of ways to get into town, and that's one of the main ones. But I'm trying to think of ways to fund it and get it done. But it's a lot of money. um,
It
but it is
is.
a major project.
Yeah, I don't know how. I mean, that's why I'm fascinated talking to people in positions like yours, especially small towns where I think coming by larger chunks of funds, you have to be pretty creative, and it's a good thing you have access to folks who can give you some ideas.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
and I don't know what the tax base is, or if there are ways that the locals might be willing to jump in, or are you leery of asking for funds for a road?
I don't, I wouldn't have a problem, I suppose, asking, but I don't think it would pass.
Got it.
It's possible it could. You know, it's from where we're at, and a lot of economically, there's people who are you know I believe we're like a lower economic. I forget the phrase, but people's income in our area is kind of lower compared to other areas, and
Right.
extra, you know, tax, an extra, you know, um, a levy, or an
Mm-hmm.
extra expense on people's property taxes is not, it's hard, and some people, they may not, you know, it's possible to say, well, I don't even drive on that road. Why do I want to pay? You know,
Well,
it,
true.
it's hard to know. I mean, we that's definitely something that we can look at, um, and see, like, just kind of gauge the public interest in, hey, would you pay more taxes to get that road done? But I'm not ready to put that in front of the voters. Um, I'm not I'm not ready to do that. That's something that's something council has to you know talk about. And actually, technically, it's not even up to me. The council would have to vote for that to go in front of the voters. Um, so I I can definitely ask and bring it up and just say, is this something we want to look at? I'm leaning more toward the loan option, but
Mm-hmm.
that because that's not an extra tax hit to anybody. It's
No,
just
but you
something.
do have to come up with the funds to pay it back over time, so there's
Right.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. But it would
Well,
be.
and I've heard of people taking surveys or finding ways to do simple surveys to find interest, and that's hard to do. That takes time. Everybody
Yeah.
would essentially have to volunteer, or the city manager might help you formulate a plan for how to do that.
Yeah. I actually did a survey. The beginning, kind of close to when I got started. I don't. There wasn't any questions about Sheridan Road, though. It was kind of more just like a
Right.
general, like, survey, like what you would like to see in town. I was trying to get, like,
Mm-hmm.
feedback, like what businesses would you like to see in town, stuff like that.
Hmm.
But I don't know how many responses I got. It was around. It was, well, I don't want to say, it was less than 100, though, for sure. And maybe that's good. I don't know what the typical return on surveys are, dependent on your size for your city. But I did get some feedback, but
Well,
we
that's
didn't have.
another topic too. I mean, so I used to think Sheridan was, I don't know, back in the day because I started living there in 1990 and we moved away in 90 or 2007. But the economy way back then, I think, had was still even then recovering from what I believe was probably pretty solid foundation of logging. And Oregon was hit all over the place by certain environmental approaches to logging, and I think that may have been a major factor in things getting harder for people who decided to stay there and not relocate to find better positions, etc. But now you have a factory for recreational vehicles, and that seems like a great thing. But do you have any sense of maybe forestry coming back or some other new inspiration that could help raise people's standard of living?
I'm not sure if it would be
Yeah.
related to the mills. I mean, I know I've seen mills not in our area, several miles away, are closing. I know Hampton, they're working on their super mill, which I think will cut about 70 jobs
Oh,
from there, and they're pretty close to, it's in Willamina. People who live in Sheridan will work there. I think
sure.
we do have a lot of commuters either coming in to work at the
Gotcha.
prison or at Forest River, or people who do live in town and then they work in McMinnville, Salem, Dallas, you know.
Got it.
Um,
So maybe
and
making it more, continue to make it more attractive for people who commute, then could bring in, that's sort of a way of bringing in income because they want to live there and work somewhere else,
yeah,
right?
that or yeah, that definitely is one way. I think also is adding, businesses, not like, you know, like a business that might have like, three or four employees. That definitely would help, especially our downtown. We need small businesses like that. But I think adding
Hmm.
like a larger industrial like, company. That's one of the things I am working on. Well, it's not really me. It's Sedcore that's working on it. But it was
Okay.
something I wanted to get started. And Sedcore is looking at our industrial zone, um, which to me, I had always, before I got involved in city government, I thought it was just kind of the transition area between Sheridan and Willamina, but it actually is in our city limits and it's zone industrial. I believe it's everything past, I think it's Washington, maybe it's Washington Street. It's around there. I'd have to look at a map to point, but basically between Rock Creek Road and the railroad tracks is all in our city limits and is pretty much all zoned industrial.
Wow.
And we don't really have industrial businesses out there. Um, it's kind of a weird story how that land was even brought into the city, but there's actually like a lot of homes too. Um, so there's like residences mixed in, with land that's zoned industrial. It's kind of odd,
Hmm.
uh, but there are some decent chunks of industrial land without homes nearby. Um, and Sedcore's looking at like how feasible would it be, if for industrial businesses to come here, um, in that zone. And one of our problems, of course, is we're in the floodplain,
Oh,
so that isn't as attractive to some businesses, I
the whole
suppose.
town or just that section?
Pretty much the whole town is in the
Oh,
floodplain, actually.
that's not nice.
Yeah, but that section, part of it is out of the floodplain. Um, at least the flood map says it is, but
Hmm.
the soil is hydric soil, which, from what I understand, is considered part of the floodplain. But then there's also wetlands, and I might be getting those mixed up. I know pretty much all the town is in the floodplain. That area is, by some maps, it says it's out of the floodplain. But there's some hydric soils there, and I think that sometimes means wetlands. That's part of the problem is that usually you don't know, if it's like wetlands until you get a what's called a wetland delineation, and that will basically tell you, okay, this part of your property does have wetlands on it. You can't develop there. So,
Right.
so if by chance we get a company that wants to come, and in that industrial zone, um, they, any company, they have to do due diligence before they buy property, and that would just be part of it. Is they have to pay for a wetland delineation, and if they pay for that and they find out, oh, this whole lot's wetlands, you can't build here, then, you know, they can't build there, which is, too bad. But um, they
So
if
that's
it's
pretty preventive for growth. I mean, you want to have big people coming in and stoke the economy, but it sounds like there aren't a lot of places, and maybe that's why you are thinking of just trying to revitalize downtown with the right kind of businesses.
well, that's part of the problem too. So downtown for sure is in the floodplain,
Oh,
and what has happened is one of our major, well, I shouldn't say our major, one of our large buildings that was kind of the core of downtown, the Hyder building. Um, Someone bought that, they gutted it, uh, and then they ran out of money, and it was for sale.
Mm,
So
got
we're
it.
it's kind of I've been in there a few times. You're gonna have to put in new everything basically. It's been seismically upgraded, so seismically it's fine.
Hmm.
It's gonna need new electrical, new plumbing,
Hmm.
but
Wow.
part of the problem is when you're doing a project like that, and it's in the floodplain. If the project costs or the permit costs, I'm not 100% sure, but basically, if you're going to do a bunch of work, uh, FEMA comes in and says, "Whoa, you're going to be doing a lot of work on this project. You need to raise it up to floodplain standards or floodplain code or whatever." Um, so, with that building, with its new owner, um, if they want to do it the right way, the way they probably should, they're going to have to raise the floor uh, of the bottom floor, and then they're going to have to do some sort of special paint on the outside. So if floodwaters come, it won't get flooded.
Got
Um,
it.
and
Wow.
that makes sense, except it's just an extra cost. It's
Probably
expensive.
substantial. Sounds
Yeah,
like it would be very expensive.
yeah. So there's four storefronts right there, and then there's apartments on top. And as long as I've lived there, I don't think it's ever been used as apartments. Um,
Right.
but So if somebody does want to buy it, on top of all the costs to put in new everything, they're going to have to pay to make it be floodplain compliant or meet up to current floodplain standards. Which, if you're a developer or a business person, you're probably going to want the least amount of expenses possible. You know what I mean? So if you had the choice of owning a building and doing business somewhere, that extra floodplain cost is going to be a deterrent. Or even building a new building. That's we have a say we have a piece of land downtown, and it's zoned commercial. Somebody could put a commercial building there. Well, they're going to have an extra fee, to raise it up above the floodplain. You know, and you go
Do you
to
know if they had to do that for Subway? Because that's a relatively new addition and that's a chain. So either that building was already capable, or they had the money to make it compatible.
yeah, that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure how they did that.
Hmm.
I know that building was, I think it was vacant for a little while or for a long while. Uh, I don't remember for sure, but I know that there was work being done in there on off and on
Hmm.
for a while. Um, and then I think it was vacant and it kind of was still, and then all of a sudden it was a Subway. Um,
Hmm.
at least from my
Well, they
recollection.
must have.
Well,
If Subway could get in there, it seems to me like maybe they're. It'd be interesting to find out how they got in and what they had to
yeah,
do, because maybe those hurdles for those other buildings aren't as high as at least FEMA is reportedly saying that they are. And I foresee a change to FEMA. The talk these in the last 3 weeks is lots of federal programs are maybe going to disappear or change dramatically, and there's not a huge fan base for FEMA right now. So, not that we want people to be unsafe or have their business flood, but maybe there's a simpler way to take care
yeah,
of things like that. I wouldn't expect you to know all about that. Can I talk to you about Gary Mathis?
yeah,
Okay, so I noticed he spoke at your last council meeting, and he was fortunate enough to be able to go to Denmark. Seems like a super awesome honor that they would find someone in Sheridan and take him with a bunch of other folks and see a new way of handling waste water for new purposes. Can you kind of summarize what that was all about?
yeah. They from what I understand, it was looking at really wastewater and drinkable water, kind of
Oh,
as and kind of different ways to look at things. Um, and one of the things that kind of came up was our uh, rainwater. I'm trying to think. So I know
stormwater.
stormwater. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that was one of it too. Is looking at how we can deal with that too. Um, but yeah, they we are lucky. We do have a lot of water. Um, we have Stony Mountain Reservoir, which is the closest it's probably ever been to actually being online. Um, and
Are you saying
but
online as in it never was online and now it is? You're talking about the reservoir?
yeah, the reservoir. Yeah, so so that's a big 60 million gallon reservoir that is just sitting there. Uh,
Wow.
but we got our water master plan done, and it looks like we have a path forward on to get it online finally.
Oh, man.
They completed it in 2009, and it's just sat there, and it's been full.
How many
We
miles is it up in the hills from downtown?
uh from a straight shot, it might be 7 miles
Wow.
between 7 and 9.
So
It's
it's
up there.
it's been built, but it wasn't able to hook up to your city system. Holy moly!
Yeah, I think they ran out of money for the project.
What a bummer.
I'm not sure of its whole history, but it's real. We're I think probably the closest we've ever been to actually getting it online. This
Let's do it.
yeah, the water master plan kind of told us, okay, this is what you need to do. Um, we basically can use the existing water line because we get water from the springs, but that's separate than the reservoir.
Uh,
Uh, but so we can use that water line that already exists, um, but we're going to need to upsize it in the future. But we don't have to do that yet. Um, my I thought that we were going to have to upsize the whole pipe before we could get it online, which was like $21 million.
mm,
But we can use the existing infrastructure basically to get the water to town. Now, if we double our size, the pipe's not going to meet demand. That's part of the problem. But um, we can also pull from the Yamhill River, though. So if somehow we magically doubled in size, I think we would be okay. But I don't know for sure
mm, mm.
as far as water, but I don't see that happening. But over time, we are going to want to upsize that pipe. But what's nice is we can do it slowly in sections. We don't have to spend 21 million on it. But again, that's water, and it's less difficult to get grants and funding for water. So that project's a little
Interesting.
better. But as far as water goes, we're pretty good on water because we have the reservoir, we have the springs, and then we have the whole Yamhill River. Well, not the
Oh,
whole
some
river,
people
but
would say, well, you'd have to treat the water from the Yamhill and bring it back into the system.
mhm.
People have joked forever about the water in the Yamhill. And
Yeah,
actually, Willamette too is like a three-headed fish or whatever. But
yeah.
I don't know how bad it is chemically. It's just a regular old river, right? But you
Well,
also get. Now let's see. Are you up river from McMinnville or down river? Do you know which way it
or
flows?
up. It fl- it flows toward
Toward McMinnville.
McMinnville. Yeah,
Okay, well that's good then. So you have more the purer water. That makes sense. It's good.
yeah.
Now,
Though yeah, and one of the things about getting Stony Mountain online is that we would have to pull less from the Yamhill River, and I was kind of wanting to do that because the water up there's basically from streams and creeks and things. It's clean. You know,
right.
the Yamhill River, it's anything can get in there. Anybody can go in there too. Like I it's next to the road. Somebody could
Dump
uh
something.
well dump or even accidentally they could crash. They could end up in the river,
Well,
something like
that's
that.
true.
It's we don't have control over what happens in that river necessarily. You know what I mean? But we can control Stony Mountain
True.
Reservoir,
Yeah.
and it's that water is, I would assume it's uh, cleaner, probably has less stuff in it. It's basically, it's
Natural.
yeah, natural, like
Yeah.
springs up there. Yeah, we would still have to treat, the water, because I mean the state says we have to. But I mean, we from that reservoir it would still get treated. It's but
Yep.
my thinking is it's probably, better water than the Yam Hill. Of course, they're both safe. It's just, difference of the source and, stuff like that. But as far as stormwater goes, um, and wastewater, the I believe our stormwater. I'm not as familiar with that system. I believe it ends up in the river. Um, but as far as the wastewater goes, it goes through our sewer plant and then ends up at our lagoons, which are these big, they're lakes. They look like lakes, next to town. And there's if we could, find an alternate way to use that wastewater. I mean, once those get full, we either have to make a new one, or that's kind of our only kind of our only option. Once those lagoons start to reach, max capacity, we have to add a new one, basically.
And you're
Um,
sharing those. Are you sharing those with FCI, or do they have their own?
they have their own.
Oh, okay.
So
Hmm.
I believe well, I don't want to give any wrong information. I know but they have dedicated ones. I don't know how many they have, and they're a
Okay.
little bit smaller. But ours for the city are some of the big ones.
Hmm.
Um, we we do have space to add a fifth. I believe maybe five. We do have space to add another one, but again, that's millions to
Lots of
add.
money. So you say that maybe water and water treatment is a little easier to get money for, but you still have to have someone to write or seek out or do the work and research. Is that something that someone on staff does, or you as board or city council and mayor have to do on your own, or would you be seeking someone who could just do that for you to help move things along?
Yeah, I say easier. I guess I should say less difficult, because
Oh,
it's not.
right, yeah.
But I guess it's less difficult to get grants for like water for major,
But it
major
still
stuff.
takes a ton of work. So,
But yes, but as opposed to like streets, there's not as much funding, I suppose, out there. Like, it doesn't even exist in the first place, if that makes sense. So like,
yeah.
there's more funding opportunities out there for water, for sewer. There's less for streets. So that makes, streets and things harder. But yeah, no, that takes staff time. Um, we can have the cog, work on some of the grants and help us with it, but that's something that they would do for a fee. It would take staff time, and that's what's hard, is that for us to do things and to do a lot of positive changes and things, we do need grant money. And your our former city manager, a lot of that she was doing a lot of grants,
Okay.
but it wasn't just her, it was staff.
Right.
You have to provide all the data, and
Yep.
there's work,
Research. It's the
yeah,
time.
and like there's like prep work, like you have to prove, like it's not just some idea you had. Like, no, we spent time, we talked to people in town, there was work done, there
Hmm.
was and this is what we discovered, or what we determined. um so you can't just say, yeah, that sounds good, and then I guess it depends on the project. I mean, we can show data like, yeah, this is currently what our sewer lagoons or whatever look like. This is currently what we have. For some grants. Other things, like if we want to build like a rec center or something, we're going to have to show the data, like, okay, this is where it would go, this is how many people are interested, this is what they'd like to see, stuff like that. We can't just say, yeah, that sounds good, and apply to that type of a grant. But yeah, that's that we don't have a dedicated person to do grants.
Yeah. Can somebody be hired as a grant writer and write their salary into the grant should it be accepted? It's I've heard of that back in the day. I don't know how it's done now.
Yeah, I I've heard of that too. Like they basically would get a percentage of any grant awarded. So it's kind of like the better grant writer you are, the more money you
Exactly.
get. Um,
Yep.
and I have heard of that, and I have talked to their acting city manager even about that, and because that's one way to fund a grant writer. Because the hard thing, and since I became mayor, I've learned this. The hard thing with grants is that they're competitive a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm.
so, I mean, a lot of cities have water issues. We are, as far as our supply goes, we're lucky because we do have a supply. A lot of towns and cities, they are running out or having difficulties, getting things, you know, connected. But a lot of these, there's not like an infinite amount of money for these grants. And so what happens is, you know, they are competitive, but we're having to fight. Well, not fight, but we're going to have to apply to these grants with other cities who are, this 3-4 times our size. Maybe Portland. Some cities have dedicated grant writers. They have grant writing departments, maybe. You know,
Right,
uh,
but the other thing I feel like there's potential competitive edge if the people that you're talking to are looking to help the rural and not just the bigger cities. It seems like there are people out there that's kind of their goal, but again, it takes a lot of time to figure out who they are, where they are, and then what works for them. What are they looking for that makes them happy with your proposal? So that's definitely something to put on the list of priorities or prayer for me for the city, just so you guys can feel like you're have some potential to grow sooner.
mhm.
Is
Yeah,
Sheridan able to keep a pretty good handle on criminal activity with the current law enforcement, or I assume it's just some Yamhill County sheriffs that are working there?
yeah. We have we're contracted for 3 um, sheriff deputies. Um, I'd like to have 4, um, but I mean, that's increased increased costs, of course. For a while, I know citizens have wanted 4. Um, they want, um, you know, they want somebody in Sheridan, all the time. Um, and I think um, what people think currently is that there's a part of the day where we don't have police coverage, or there's just
Is it
no.
nighttime that's the issue, or
So we are what we have contracts for is 3, but that's like 3 people.
mm-hmm.
So depending on how their shift works, we might not have a dedicated deputy, on shift, or there might, it's you know how
Got
they
it.
structure their days and on the time of the days. So um, so if we had 4, I guess the thought is that we could have, you know 2 deputies, you know doing AM PM shifts Monday through Thursday, and then 2
Right.
deputies, you know Thursday through
Yep.
Sunday,
Yep.
do it in a way where we mostly have coverage. But we always have police coverage. If there's 911 call, we get, we still have police. There's rural patrol around our area. There's like Grand Ron has their police department. They can respond.
Hmm.
I mean, it's not like if someone calls 911, nothing happens. Like we get, you know sheriff deputies here. And something else that happens that I don't know if people always think of, but if there's like, say there's a major incident when we do have police coverage, like, okay, it's noon, we have a dedicated, sheriff's deputy in town. If something major happens in McMinnville or even on Highway 18, most likely that sheriff's deputy is going to get pulled over to there.
True. Yeah.
Even though we're, paying, that's part of our contract is, this time of the day, these days of the week we have a dedicated deputy. Doesn't always mean that we have a dedicated, deputy in town. And that works the other way too. Something happens in Sheridan, our one sheriff's deputy isn't going to respond if it's something major. We could have 2, 3, 4 sheriff's deputies there. And I've seen it. There's multiple cars sometimes, you know, at even just pulling somebody over. Sometimes there's 2 cars there, So even though we aren't paying for 2 during that time slot, we have 2 right there. So it's, it's hard to sometimes, I guess, explain and just let people know that no, we do have 24-hour coverage. It's just that we might not have a dedicated deputy, in town, 24/7. But again, I mean, depending on what's going on, our dedicated deputy might not be in town anyways.
Sure.
So
And in terms of prevention, I see a fair share of arrests and maybe even headline arrests of people from Sheridan. So not just responding to something, but maybe doing a little bit of detective work for someone manufacturing drugs on X Street or whatever. It seems like somebody's doing a pretty good job of keeping on top of things before they get bigger as well.
yeah, the we get statistics of numbers of arrests for different crimes and things like that, for our council meetings, and they're definitely busy, and we even get a list of like the calls that they're being called to, and so we're able to see a lot of that. But there's a ton of work that they're doing.
Yep.
And it's I'm sure they have, they know what's going on. It's just sometimes a matter of time before they can, have enough evidence to, go forward, that type of thing. But yeah, they're definitely getting things done.
How long have you been mayor?
It was last March, so I've almost been mayor almost a year.
Okay. Well, congratulations. And before that, how long were you on the council?
About a year.
Okay.
And a couple. So yeah. So I was sworn in January of 23, and then I became mayor March of 24.
And what got you interested in helping out in such a big way?
Well, I mean that was just it. I just wanted to help. I just wanted to do something. My grandfather was on city council probably like 20 some years,
Oh man.
and I, I just wanted to help. I saw things in town that I, was unhappy with,
Mm-hmm.
and I just wanted to try and get involved and help. But over the course of being on council, there's a lot of stuff that I learned that I can't help with, and I can't
Right.
do when I don't have power to influence.
Yeah.
But trying to do what I can,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Might
try
take
and
more than just you guys just inspiring others to jump in. I mean, there's probably a lot of people who would like to assist if there was a way for the town to get in on this or that
yeah.
thing. And speaking of which, what you mentioned the economy, which is a big deal. It kind of affects a lot of other things. But do you have any grand visions for Sheridan for the next few years? And it doesn't just have to be the economy. It could be artistic or health or safety or maybe even just public education. I don't know how closely you work with the school district, but is there sort of like this dream that you have?
Um, yeah, there's kind of different pieces there. So, the one of the big things, is I'd like to work more with Willamina on a lot of different things. We are pretty close.
Yeah.
A lot of our kids,
Go back
they
and
might,
forth between the schools, right?
yeah.
Yep.
And then, people, maybe they grew up in Sheridan, they live in Willamina now, or, they're going to stuff going on in Willamina. They're going to stuff going on in Sheridan.
Mm-hmm.
We're we're pretty close, and people are already used to having to drive to McMinnville for a lot of things, and driving, maybe 5 miles to Sheridan or 5 miles to Willamina isn't that big of a thing. But I think working what we can do to kind of work together, I'd like to do more of that. One of the things is we've been working. We're very early in the process trying to get YMCA kind of between Sheridan and Willamina.
Oh man,
There's probably going to be obstacles, of course, because that's a huge goal, a huge you know project. But
it's a great
I,
idea though.
we've met with the executive director of the Sherwood YMCA, and basically how that works is you have to get sponsored by another YMCA
Ah, yeah.
facility, and he's from the conversations I've had with him, he sounds on board and thinks Sheridan Willamina
Wow.
would great fit. We have the city owns a piece of land, 17 acres outside of town, which would be plenty large enough for a facility.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's promising.
Yeah.
There's hurdles, but we're working toward that, and that would be between Sheridan and Willamina. So that would be helpful, just even for a place to go, a meeting space. People
Mm-hmm.
can exercise there. Kind of from what I've kind of seen, we need a space, to hold, even events, community events. We have to all the time. We have to use like, gyms, and those get used up by sports teams too, So
Yeah.
it's hard to find space, especially for a large event. But
Well, and as the age-old thing that people say, the kids need something to do, and a YMCA seems like it could be a place for
yeah,
kids to do something. When I was small, in the summer, I would go to the YMCA in my little town and play bumper pool or swim, and it was a pretty great place to hang out for a while. So, I mean,
yeah, and I mean, that's one of the reasons I'd like to see it, just because our town, well, and Sheridan and Willamina, like the stats on the number of kids, who qualify, for free and reduced lunch, or who are economically disadvantaged is really high, and those kids do need to be able to do something, and I think a Y would be great. One of the
mm-hmm.
problems is, you know, that we'll have to figure out is a safe way to get kids there. But the talking with a Y, they can always provide transportation, and down the road, I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
hopefully be able to get sidewalks.
Hmm.
It's just a super long, stretch of road. Uh, but that's one of those
True.
hurdles is, hey, how do we get kids there safely?
Well, that ties into one of my last questions because since I attend a church in Sheridan, if a local church or churches wanted to bless the city with help on a project like that, and maybe even provide drivers that are approved and vehicles, and just pick kids up at a certain time, kind of like our own local volunteer busing, just or food or prayer or participation. What kinds of things besides that, which I think would be a really fun project for all the churches to jump in on, would be helpful to you if there was more participation, maybe more cooperation, or even communication with the churches. Like if we had a bulletin board and things that the city wants us to know or to see, we definitely could put it up there. Just anything come to mind? I mean, we would definitely be praying for you, but
I know.
practical.
So I know that the city every once in a while they'll do like an event, like around around Christmas time. They did like a shoe drive for shoes for kids. I know Rotary does like a coat drive, um, usually around winter time for kids. But there's a lot of different things. But I think if your church is doing some kind of event, it could be anything. Um, as long as I think getting the word out, I think is good, because I think there is stuff in town people would go to if they knew about it and had the time. So I think getting the word out there, would certainly be helpful depending on what's going on. But
Hmm.
I would say, because I know there's a good food bag program. I believe the Churches United is doing that, and they're bringing meals to families in Sheridan on Fridays when there's no school.
Okay.
Possibly that. I'm not sure. I think they always need volunteers. um,
Okay.
but either with the food or even distributing the food. But I know there's always a need. I think at Faulkner Chapman for clothing,
Hmm.
and I know the school would know or be able to know more about
Okay.
that. But um, the American Legion does meals for people um, on I think Tuesdays and Thursdays. Anybody I think can come. And I know there's another church in town that does. Maybe it's through Churches United. There's like a meal. It's like every once in a while. I'm not sure. I know I see it in the bulletin board, but it's like a community meal. I think is what they call it. But yeah, I don't know. There's I listed a few things there, but I think
Well, I
I
mean,
think
you mentioned the YMCA project. If that is something that has enough interest and benefit for the community, it seems like I feel like we would like to help make it happen.
yeah,
Publicize it or just be part of the facilitation of the process, if that could help.
yeah, and I can. We're still in the early phases of it. We're looking at like um, the like planning aspects, like city planning aspects of it, and then like the
Hmm.
um, blueprints for the facility. A plan for
Right.
what it would look like. I mean, yeah, getting the word out because I've talked to different people about the YMCA. I haven't heard anything negative. I think people are like, it's I think they think it's needed. But I think some of the things you mentioned, like even providing transportation, or you'd even, have different programs based out of the YMCA for people to come and participate in, even too.
True.
I guess it depends, because it would be, well, we have to wait until we get the
Right.
plans like that. But there would probably be a large meeting room too, and
Yeah.
but that's going to be one of the things is to get people there. Like if kids aren't able to, you know, to walk or ride a bike there, which I wouldn't recommend in the
No,
roads
no.
current. But if their parents aren't able to drive them, then getting transportation to programs I think would be great because they're going to need. There's going to be some kids that are going to need to transportation there. But
For sure.
I think getting the word out too, I think would be great.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'd like to know more about it. Maybe I'll talk to you later about what's needed, unless that's just in the hands of the council. But if you need extra minds on a particular side project,
Hmm.
that seems like a great one. For you don't want to have too many people. If you meeting gets too full of attendees, you get nothing done. So there's that. Well, I want to bless you and thank you for what you're doing. I mean, it's awesome. Uh, Anybody who takes the time to be doing what you're doing is a special person. And I don't see that I would ever want to do it, mostly because I get kind of tired at night. I mean, if the meetings were daytime, that'd be a whole nother story. But um, I'm just thankful for what you're doing. And I pray that for all of you, the city council, the employees who work there, that your visions will come to pass and you will grow and prosper. And I appreciate your time, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
You
Appreciate it.
bet.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, of liberty and justice for all.
All right, ready?